Hello, everyone. So here we are over 3 years into the Russo-Ukrainian war. And since very early in the war, it was debated whether Western countries, which hold over $300 billion worth of Russian government assets, should confiscate them without compensation. They were frozen at the beginning of the war in the United States, Canada, all the European Union countries, the United Kingdom, and so forth, and should they be confiscated or not? And they've been humming and hawing about this. There's been vacillation from Ukraine's allies all the way through. They've usually taken the wrong decision, but far too late about supplying this weapon system, that weapon system, and so on. But it's high time we did this. And another thing that could be said to Russia, you've got to agree the ceasefire now. We'll give them, say, 24 hours to do it, or we're confiscating them. Now, would it be wrong to give them that warning? They've had 3 years to think about the risk of these things being taken away, because they might say, well, if you confiscate this, we'll do that, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I know a Western chap, a British chap with a PhD in international relations, no less, who'd call it an active war. I mean, no, it's not. Attacking another country by air, sea, and land, that's war, the kind of thing that Russia has done, not confiscating assets. Attempted the murder of the Ukrainian president in 2004, Lukashenko. That was war. Setting off a bomb in Slovakia that killed two security guards. That's war. All these things. Seizing these assets is not. So yeah, over $300 billion. These mostly belong to the Russian central bank. And most of those, something like $260 billion of them, held in various European Union countries, principally Germany, the Netherlands, France. So the group of seven of the seven major economies used to be the group of eight till Russia was expelled 11 years ago. 11 years ago today, Russia illegally annexed Crimea. So the G7 said the assets shall not go back to Russia until Russia repays Ukraine for all the damage Russia's done in this invasion. Now, the damage is at least $300 billion worth already, of buildings destroyed, of buildings wrecked, of people killed, of people wounded, sometimes permanently disabled, loss of potential earnings, and. But I don't see Russia ever doing so, because they would say, well, implicitly, that would say that we're responsible for the war, which the Russian state totally is. Now, I'm not Russophobic. Russian people are not bad. They're good and bad people in all nationalities. I'm not so naive to think that no Ukrainians ever done anything wrong in this war. But overall, of the two states, which one is guilty? And it takes someone with great moral courage and wisdom to recognize that his or her government is in the wrong in these situations. So the war damage is well over $300 billion already. If Russia think they can get their assets returned anyway, they don't have a particular reason to end the war anytime sooner. So you see how irrational the G7's position is. What they have done is they use the interest in the frozen assets to back up that $50 billion loan to Ukraine. But so far, G7 countries have fought shy of simply saying that's all taken away. So how are we going to get Russia to compensate Ukraine for Russia's illegal war of aggression, for all the damage, all the wrecking done, all the psychological torsion, all the torture to people, all the willful murder of civilians and prisoners of war and so forth, all the rapes committed on women, and all very, very well documented by any human rights organization you claim to mention, and various governments, and even by the testimony of Russians themselves sometimes, even on their Instagram posts or whatever. Russian soldiers say the stuff they've been looting. They kidnap over 20,000 children. But if this money were confiscated, then it'd be much easier on Mr. and Mrs. Taxpayer in European countries, because looking like the United States is now going to give little or nothing to the Ukraine in terms of military assets. So the European Union countries and non-EU European countries, United Kingdom, Republic of Ireland, for example, need to find a lot of money fast, and that would be at least a short-term fix. So you can simply transfer those assets to Ukraine, or say we're taking them, we're using to build new military equipment ourselves. The extant stuff we'll give to the Ukrainians now. They tend to give Ukrainians things which are towards the end of their service life: an infantry fighting vehicle, a howitzer, a tank, a helicopter, which they've used for almost 20 years, still serviceable. But you don't expect it to be destroyed or damaged in the war within a year or two, and there's no great loss, because after that it wasn't going to be usable much over 20 years anyway. And so here we go on. So we give the money of the aggressors to the country which has been aggressed. And there are a number of good aspects to this. So Ukraine will have enough money to fund its war for years to come. So the assets are held in Europe. That's over 240 billion dollars. That's more than double what all the European countries have given to Ukraine since the war began. When I say all, I'm including Switzerland, Austria. So not Austria, United Kingdom, some countries which are not in the European Union but are in NATO, or not even Republic of Ireland. We've given a tiny amount. So you could give it all to Ukraine straight away, and then European countries could be spending their own money on rearming themselves. Moreover, it would show to Russia these countries are firm, that there are serious consequences. There'll be swinging losses to you for doing this. When are we ever going to get back? Hit them where it hurts in the wallet, because it's a mafia state. Nikki Legg said in 2010, that is the private assessment of the United States government, and they're absolutely right. And obviously, they care about their filthy lucre, so we'll take their lolly away from them. And so ultimately, some of that money is going to hurt the oligarchs, and they'll see how Putin is an economic disaster for them. So why have people not taken this brave decision so far? So there are people who are resistors to this idea. Christine Lagarde, head of the European Central Bank, that French woman has said, no, we mustn't do this for various reasons. Various German financiers and politicians have fought shy. Now, people who are either Nazi inclined or communist inclined, these totalitarians, they recognize a kindred spirit in Vladimir Putin. Is those who actually care about freedom, and those who oppose oppressors, they're the ones to say, we need to take a firm stand. We have tried softly. We have tried Mr. Nice Guy for years and years, turning Nelson's eye to large-scale atrocities in Chechnya, to Putin's oppression of his own people, to the murder of journalists like Anna Politkovskaya, to increasing oppressive legislation. You might say he can do what he wants in his own country, but to the illegal invasion of Georgia, to the illegal occupation of Moldova, to attacking Ukraine for the last 11 years, not the last 3 years, giving him chance after chance after chance after chance. And it doesn't work. We've tried this diplomacy. We've tried gentle sanctions, okay? And obviously believe that war should be a last resort. And I really don't want a third world war, I can tell you. But if it is started, it will be the fault of the Putin Nazi regime. And so we go on. Some people say this would be illegal. There's sovereign immunity. Now, I know Russia's government is illegal and breaks its own laws absolutely flagrantly every single day and at an enormous scale. But there are plenty of jurists and international lawyers who say, no, it is lawful to do so. This is a state countermeasure, and precedent is vital in law. And the United States confiscated Iranian state assets, or confiscated Cuban state assets after Cuba confiscated American private assets in Cuba in the early 1960s. There are numerous other examples when two states aren't at war against each other, but neither assets are confiscated. So anyway, you can read these arguments and all their particulars, and so it's legally watertight. What are the other reasons? Also financial. Say it would render irreparable harm to the reputation of European Union countries as a place to put your money. You got to think it's as safe as the Bank of England. So other countries, People's Republic of China, various Middle Eastern countries, they would take their assets out, maybe even Israel as well, fearing it might be confiscated. There's some sort of diplomatic spat with the European Union, with the United Kingdom. Other countries like Canada, even Japan, Singapore, Australia hold some Russian state assets, much smaller. Let's say they would happen. So those various other countries from the Middle East or China, they would sell their holdings of European public debt. That would cause a spike in borrowing costs. The euro would lose value. The economy is already struggling, would go into recession. But it's highly improbable that's going to happen, because if the depositors were really worried about that, they would have withdrawn them 3 years ago, because when they saw that Russia's assets were frozen. Anyway, so there's not been any capital flight from any of these financial systems. So anyway, I don't think they're going to sell their European debt, because then you have to find someone to buy them for. And then you have to find other assets to invest in. So there are no other economies where the rule of law is honored that are running a deficit that would be a good alternative. So anyway, I think the Eurozone and other Western economies be able to withstand this. People also say, well, wait a second, if you do that, Russia's going to confiscate Western assets, corporate assets held there. But we all know that it's very risky. And if you choose to be still doing business in Russia, On your head be it. You know there's jeopardy, and you chose to run that commercial risk. And actually, Russia's already seized loads of other Western private assets there. So that's why businessmen and businesswomen with a brain in the right place have withdrawn over the last 3 years. And those are still there. They're enriching Russia and indirectly funding the Russian war economy. So they brought it on themselves. Anyway, so there's no reason why we should be particularly solicitous about those who've been so immoral as to keep indirectly funding Putin's war. So there's also the diplomatic argument. Let's say these assets could be used when it comes to a peace parley. Say, Russia, if we withdraw from Ukraine, you'll get these assets or whatever to end the war. But I don't think that's happened. Russia didn't do this primarily for economic reasons. I mean, I know there's some resources they want to rob from Ukraine. They've done so already, like grain and things like that, some of the coal, some of the rare earth metals, and so forth. Yeah, Moscow is not thinking it's going to get back these assets it lost. I don't think it's a big role in the war diplomacy. So anyway, Russia obviously really would want Ukraine to get these assets. It would make Ukraine's life an awful lot easier. So, what is the G7's policy on these frozen Russian central bank assets? It says that if there's a ceasefire, it will return these assets. But $300 billion that Russia could spend to beef up its armed forces, I think it would be very unwise to give them this when there's absolutely no indication Russia has the slightest intention of giving up on its ambition to subjugate the Ukrainians. Anyway, that would just lead to another war, and Ukraine would be relatively enfeebled by Russia having more money to fund its illegal war of unprovoked aggression. So, at the end of various wars, those who have defeated, who are judged to have been aggressors, and I know it's sometimes been victors' justice, they have to recompense those whom they have attacked. So there's an opportunity to enforce this compensation whilst the war is still going on, and therefore, and also sway the outcome of the war. That's why I think is a very strong case for doing this. And then it would give greater credibility to the idea that European Union countries can fund their own defense, and that it would be a big psychological fillip to the Ukrainians. They'd know that European Union is four square behind them, and other Western countries like the United Kingdom, Canada, and so forth. So now Ukraine's allies have run major risks. They've given all these weapon systems to Ukraine. They've killed Russian soldiers. They've allowed them to be further and further into Russia. They've lost two-thirds of their tank fleet. They've suffered horrendous losses. They're using older equipment. They've got a labor shortage. They have will in a year from now they will have spent all their national wealth fund and so on. So they really just don't have any spare capacity to do much more damage for the next few years. We've got to make sure that if they try to do so, that European countries are armed to the teeth. Thank you for watching my channel. Make sure you subscribe on Patreon today, PayPal, George Callahan 79 at gmail.com. Toodaloo.